Coming up, the New York Football Giants put the Packers win in London safely in the rearview mirror as we turn our attention fully over to the Baltimore Ravens. How will Wink Martindale's inside information help slow down Lamar Jackson? And will the New York Football Giants get out to a faster start against a potentially dynamic team in the Ravens? We break it all down next. Yes, friends, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, we are your hosts over here, Adam Marbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast. My boy, Doug Norrie, and yonder there, the season generational ticket holder, the healthy, wealthy, and wise Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
I am well. I'm feeling good. Giants are 4-1, and it just feels like the momentum. You wake up every morning, you turn on any of the sports talk shows, Adam, and everyone's talking about the Giants. The best part is, like, they ask if they're for real or not, and everyone's like, well, they have a good coach, and that's all they pretty much say. So I just love we're still flying under the radar at 4-1.
I don't think so, sir. I don't think so. Nice try. I know you're trying to do here, because we all know that the New York Football Giants historically struggle in the face of the spotlight being on them, something that I don't think is going to be an issue for this team under Brian Daboll. However, we know that power rankings across the country, no matter which metric you go by, worst, the Giants are the 13th team in the power rankings. At best, some team, NFL on CBS has the Giants as the 7th or 8th best team in the power rankings. So we have officially arrived, as they say. Now it's about whether or not some of those other guys in the club are looking around going, okay, I've seen some moves here. I've seen a little bit of work these guys are doing, but let's find out, are they omni-turners?
Adam, the fact that we are in the top 10, people are starting to take notice. It is crazy how thin the margins are in the NFL today, though. You think about someone like the Cleveland Browns. If Jacoby Brissett is not throwing interceptions, they could be undefeated. You think about the Baltimore Ravens having a 3-2 record right now. Obviously, they had that monumental collapse against the Dolphins in the fourth quarter where they couldn't stop anyone. They could very well be 4-1. The Giants, with a missed field goal, with a made field goal against the Titans, by their kicker, all of a sudden that's a loss. And the Giants are down double digits in the second half against the reigning MVP and miraculously come back to win. It does show how razor thin the margins are when you're talking about the difference between wins and losses.
Oh, yeah. We were talking with Justin, obviously, this is a good acronym that they've made. Trade, Talking Ravens all day, every day. Really nice job by them. Check out their content. Did a crossover late yesterday as well on their show. But they were saying, it's like, yeah, this team could be undefeated, right? The Ravens could be undefeated right now. It's like, but they're not, right? Like, same thing. Like, Giants could be a 1-4 team, if you go through every single game and say what could have gone right, but they're not. They're a 4-1 team because more has gone right for them than not. Quickly shouting out over on the live YouTube to Izzy, who was the first man in here. Thanks for joining the scene. Marty, good to see that you're on the mend and back in action, along with Side Guy Bry. Love that. I love things that rhyme, especially when they confuse me this early in the morning. Now, that being the case, the Giants, yes, are 4-1. The Ravens are 3-2. The Ravens are coming to New Jersey for this battle. There's a couple of things that I thought before we get into anything from a game standpoint, because there's some stats here, there's some concerns, and I think first and foremost, or the biggest one, is going to be, what does Wink Martindale know? How capable is he of taking all these little nuggets that he has on Lamar Jackson and creating a very disruptive game plan for him? I tend to think, while yes, there could be something there, everybody has tape on Lamar Jackson. The thing about Lamar Jackson is he's Lamar Jackson. Before we do that, though, injury updates, where do we stand on some players? Because a lot of these guys, I think, are going to be key, especially defensively, in trying to contain Lamar.
Stop me if you've heard this before. Did not practice Kadarius Toney with his hamstring injury. Don't know which one it is. Could be a third, could be the fourth hamstring. No idea which one it has. So he was not participating. Kenny Golladay is still injured with a knee injury. Jamie Gillen, as we talked about yesterday, was expected to get on a plane and be back late last night. So he did not practice yesterday. Tony Jefferson was out with a foot injury, and Jason Pinnock was not there. On the positive note, there were some limited participants, a couple of big key names, one being Wan'Dale Robinson,
Yep.
looked pretty spry out there in some of the videos that were being posted. Have to like his chances to be able to get out there and make an impact. Leonard Williams was a limited participant. Azeez Ojulari, Adoree Jackson, Saquon Barkley managing him with the shoulder injury. Darnay Holmes was out there with a quad. Chris Myrick and Tyrod Taylor were both out there as well. So more limited participants for the Giants in just a rash of injuries that they've had. Encouraging to see guys like Wan'Dale and Leonard Williams at least out there trying to give it a go, right?
Yeah, well, for Wan'Dale Robinson, yes, because he's been you can't seem to even get this sense that he's going to be close to getting back out there. And when you come off a game like we did against the Packers, where Darius Slayton showed, okay, he can go and do this. He can play over the middle a little bit, get these route combinations, pull down some important passes. If you can put Wan'Dale out there with him, now you at least feel like you have a couple of guys that are capable of making some plays for Daniel Jones and for this offense. For Leonard Williams, though, he was a limited participant the week prior as well, right? He was out there, did some reps, went off to the side. Now I think that the volume has increased here, but it's been surprising. We talked about it when he was first injured, where we're all bullish. You can't keep this guy down. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Like the clock now feels like it's ticking to it being something pretty serious that I don't know. Even when he comes back, it's probably going to be something that just has to manage the rest of the year. Happy to see him out there. I think Adoree Jackson is probably the most critical one, just because from what we've seen so far this season, we've been up and down on the defensive line, on the edge rushing group, in the linebacker room. We've had questions there. But Adoree Jackson has always been out there helping to shut down key players for the opposing offense. Hopefully, we get more good news today, continue good news on Friday, right? Like still plenty of time here for him to clear himself up and get out there.
We got lucky last week, Adam, that the Packers ended up going away from their run game. It was just shocking that they kind of put Aaron Rodgers back in shotgun after we talked about all the play action capabilities that they had leading up to that week. They went away from their game plan and they really let the Giants dictate what they wanted to do with pressures on Aaron Rodgers. It really made no sense, especially knowing that we didn't have Leonard Williams out there, right? And so, we know, and we're going to talk about offensive coordinator Greg Roman of the Ravens a bit. I have a bunch of research and recon on exactly what style he likes to play. But again, Leonard Williams, his ability and availability being out there is going to be huge for this team, knowing how they like to run the power run game in Baltimore to set up some of those big plays for Lamar later in the game.
Of course. And I think we talked about it yesterday a little bit. I talked about it on the crossover, looking at the back end of this defense. I thought the safety room for the Giants, Xavier McKinney, we know that Julian Love got back from the concussion protocols quickly. We also know that Dane Belton has been coming on for them. And now we have another guy in the room-ish safety element there. And that is, of course, getting the return of Landon Collins to the New York Football Giants. I think those players are going to play a key role potentially here in being able to spy and try to keep an eye on where Lamar is on the field and preventing him from breaking off some of those big runs. Before we get into offensive coordinator for the Ravens and some of these stats, Landon Collins, he had a couple quotes just on the idea of what his role is going to be. Just stopping short of, he also said it was the GM that didn't want me here, not me. So I'm happy to be back. That's why I went and signed somewhere else. That can be a both and, because he did go get a very big payday when he left. And that was something that was hard for the Giants to do at the time.
Yeah. And he also had other quotes where he's like, this is where I'm meant to be. I want to retire as a Giant. He's coming back with all these things. But to your point, Adam, like, let's not totally misremember the past. Like, you could obviously not like Dave Gettleman saying he doesn't want me to be here, and also take $15 million a year to be the highest paid safety by one of our rivals. And it can be okay. Like, it was really good that the Giants didn't give Landon Collins all that money, because maybe we don't end up with Xavier McKinney at some point. There's a world where all these different things are moving parts.
We could not had enough money to go and sign Kenny Galladay. I mean, geez.
Imagine that. Imagine. Yeah. So when you start doing the mental gymnastics of what it would have meant if we gave Landon Collins the big money, who knows? He probably wouldn't be on this roster anymore if we did give him the money back in the day. Right. So, like, there's weird worlds where this works. Like, Joe Shane would have come in and been like, nope, not that guy.
Landon Collins would be giving an interview saying, even back when I signed the extension with the Giants, I always liked Washington. So I'm really happy to be here and be a part of their secondary.
Right. But I mean, we say this all tongue in cheek, but it is great to see Landon back. When he was here, the one thing the one thing you cannot ever debate is whether or not he cares and the effort that he puts on the field. sometimes his skill set, dictates when he can actually show out in his best. Him being down in the box, being a thumper, using his strength and athleticism has always been part of his game. I think we've realized that the challenge has always been in pass coverage. When a quarterback has a little bit of time, can he cover wide receivers and tight ends for longer periods? That's always been his challenge. But Adam, I think the way that Wink Martindale, and you see him already in this defense, maybe there's a little bit of an understanding with the coaching staff and Landon on where they see his fit.
Yeah, well, and it can end up benefiting nicely, especially in a game like this and just around this portion of the season right now, right? We know the Giants have had a lot of injuries in the linebacking room. We know that they bring back in Jalen Smith. We know that Ward has been otherworldly in terms of what we thought expectations were coming in and what he's been able to contribute for this team. So you have these guys that fit into these pieces and into these spots, but when you think about the secondary, even if Adoree Jackson is out there, right, then we're into Fabian Moreau and we're into Nick McLeod, and we're impressed with what they showed us last week, but that's going to be a hard thing to rely on. There's some shifty receivers and Duvernay over for Baltimore. We know that Mark Andrews is going to be a key part of this, to say nothing of Lamar. So now in that secondary, if there's this understanding, well, Xavier McKinney, we know that he is a jack of all trades. We know that Dame Belton has shown a real speed out there, an instinctual kind of movement getting after the ball. We can push and pull here now. We can play a little bit. We can allow those safeties to sit back and maybe have, the 3 deep safety scenario that could come into effect here, where Landon ends up down in the box, but being able to present some different looks can give Martindale some versatility here as far as what he tries to give look-wise to the Baltimore Ravens.
Well, Adam, the even further update on Landon Collins is he was practicing with the inside linebackers. So
and that's kind of what I wondered about. I mean, you would assume he'd go down into the box there out of that position. But listen, if the easiest thing is just to start there and he gets it and he understands the role, I'm elated by that, because his weight, I think, is 15 pounds, 15 pounds over our safeties and only like 5 or 10 pounds underneath our linebackers.
Well, he presents a really good hybrid in Wink Martindale's system. You saw against the Packers, we were running 6 defensive back sets. We were trying to confuse things. We want as many hands up in the air and not down in the ground as humanly possible. Landon Collins can guard a tight end, maybe not Mark Andrews in his first day back, one-on-one matchups, but in a pinch, he has.
There's going to be times,
right?
Yeah,
he's going to have to drop back, maybe in some zone coverage. He's going to play a little bit of linebacker. He's going to be up in the box trying to stop that power run game. You hope that he gets activated. You expect him to potentially be out there, and maybe he takes on the Micah McFadden role a little bit more in this game, knowing that we're a little thin across both lines at this point.
Well, and I'll even go a step further here, because first thing, it's not a knock on Tay Crowder, but listen, I'll take my chances with almost anybody trying to cover Mark Andrews, right? So maybe Landon gets him a couple times, maybe Tay does, maybe a safety comes down. We don't know. We know it's going to be difficult. Mark Andrews, I can't remember. I think he's up to 32 passes for 350 and 4 touchdowns on the year. Like, the guy is a machine and about as consistent as you can possibly be at the position. But the wrinkle, you mentioned Micah McFadden. If Landon Collins is out there playing, I like the idea of some of those stunts and some of those things happening up in the defensive front, and Landon Collins going from inside linebacker and coming around the edge off of Kayvon Thibodeau's hip and bringing pressure on Lamar Jackson. If I'm going to look at these players and say, yeah, Micah McFadden, bullet train downhill, Tay Crowder has certainly done an admirable job for them, and then you have players like Jalen Smith, who's been a good run stuffer. If Landon Collins has enough speed and still has enough of that strength to be able to come around that edge and blow up a running back getting after Lamar, you can do some tricky things there where maybe Jackson isn't going to be able to necessarily sense where that pressure is coming from, to say nothing of trying to win some one-on-one matchups. But there's some nice wrinkles here where he could get utilized.
I couldn't agree more. And you're going to see the same thing that we had against Aaron Rodgers in terms of there could be 6 defensive backs out there. There could be Landon Collins. It could be Landon Collins and Micah McFadden. Obviously, Wink wants to confuse where the pressure is gonna be coming from, because the one thing that we know is we have to be able to figure out ways to contain Lamar Jackson, keep him in the pocket. If he knows where the pressure is coming from and is able to use his athleticism to get outside, the Giants are going to be in a world of hurt on defense.
Yeah, and I anticipate the safeties. We're seeing some things in the comments here too. Defending Andrews, defending all these things. I just think the safeties are going to play a really important role in this game, especially when we look at the health of that cornerback room. We'll touch on that even a little bit more tomorrow. So when we think about this offensive side of the ball, and I know you have a lot of key stats when we talk about the offensive coordinator and what's going on there, not to mention the fact that obviously they have a hole or a replacement, a young talent on the defensive side when Wink Martindale left. I just wanted to leave you with this as you lead in. Ravens are the 4th highest scoring team in the NFL. They average almost 28 points per game. Jackson is also completing 95 of 149 pass attempts for over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. One of the things that I wonder if you will touch on is some of those misses in the downfield area for Lamar Jackson. The big playability, as explosive as they've been from a scoring standpoint, one of my concerns is defending against. The Giants have done a great job keeping things in front of them. And that little flick of the wrist sometimes, not the most accurate, but if he connects, all of a sudden you have some real concerns.
So, Adam, stop me at any moment because I have a lot of information and insight on the offensive philosophy of the Baltimore Ravens and what the Giants are potentially going to do. Let me know because there's a lot to go through here. And a lot of this is based on Stephen Ruiz from The Ringer did an amazing breakdown of how the Baltimore Ravens can look so explosive, yet all Baltimore Raven fans want offensive coordinator Greg Roman fired. Like you mentioned, they averaged 28 points a game, and we had Justin on yesterday, and he's like, I think Greg Roman should have been fired last year. Like, and I'm wondering, like, how could you be scoring almost 30 points a game and you're frustrated with your offensive coordinator? And so once you start peeling back the onion, you start understanding what has happened with the Baltimore Ravens. And I'll go very quickly and fast forward to today. But in 2019, Greg Roman became the offensive coordinator, and he designed an offense specifically based around Lamar Jackson. It's what made him burst onto the scene. He was amazing, wins the MVP. He looks phenomenal and fantastic. Since then, things have started to slowly decline in terms of seeing that athleticism on display and being as explosive and being multidimensional. Now, the Baltimore Ravens are still scoring points at him, but they lost. Remember, in 2019, they lost that playoff game to the Tennessee Titans where they got down early, and everyone's like, can Lamar throw them back into the game? And it was an unmitigated disaster. They lost, right? Mm-hmm. And so here is the quote from one of our old friends, Logan Ryan, who came out and was on that Tennessee Titans defense. And they said, what did you do to the Baltimore Ravens to really confuse them? And he said, and I quote, we wanted to give him loaded boxes all night to get him out of the run game. We were either playing with a loaded box or man-to-man and make him beat us throwing the ball outside mano-a-mano, or we were going to play a zone defense. So we had 8 and 9-man boxes all night. If you play Madden and run Engage 8 all day, it's hard to run the ball.
And so I'll interject here momentarily. Yeah. And I think it goes hand in hand. You talked about being on with Justin and being on with them yesterday in the late afternoon. When we talked about it, one of the big things was saying, like, is Greg Roman and are the Baltimore Ravens fully confident in Lamar Jackson, which sounds like an insane statement to be making, but they get so restricted with him inside of that passing game that it doesn't seem like they're willing to have him go out and try to expose teams. Now you go back to that example and you say, well, because when he gets all those guys in the box and it's one-on-one coverage, hey, what are you going to do? We know that Rashad Bateman right now is coming off a little bit of an injury for him. They have Duvernay, and wouldn't you know it, mirroring each other in a lot of ways here. They have Justin over there, AJ on that podcast, as well as Coach, and he came in saying, well, look at their wide receiver room. And they were almost having a laugh of like, we have a better wide receiver room than the Giants. Like, that's not necessarily something you say when you take out the tight end and Mark Andrews. The Ravens have not done a good job putting in players that make sense for Lamar Jackson and for his skill set. Andy Isabella, who you talked about maybe wanting the Giants to take a look at, he went to Baltimore, got on the practice squad, could be elevated for this game. And we talked a little about that yesterday of that's what you need. You need guys that get scramble drills, that are shifty, that can play back to the quarterback. And that's a little bit about this hand-in-hand element is you can tell me that Lamar Jackson is not the perfect thrower of the ball. I get it. He's still completing almost 64% of his passes. You got to be a better coordinator. I'm happy that he's not. But the general sentiment is this guy, I'll give you one last point that the coach brought up in this one. He said, what they do primarily on offense is they run the same general set of plays, but they'll line up a tight end on the left. They'll line him up on the right. They'll shift a player in the backfield. And he said that works in high school football. It doesn't work at the NFL level, and that's what Greg Roman does a ton of.
Greg Roman is a power run guy. You just mentioned it. He likes bringing an extra tight end in. He mixes it up by putting 2 running backs in the backfield. Like, they
had Mark Andrews and they drafted 2 more tight ends.
That's the crazy part about this offensive scheme. And so the idea is they do all this power running, Adam, which when you do this power running, as the Giants know from all the injuries we had in the wide receiver group, it takes another wide receiver off the field because you have to find a way to get more blockers in to be able to do the power run game. So with Lamar Jackson, you're congesting everything. You're doing this power run game. You're bringing in more big bodies. You're making defenses bring 8 guys into the box. And I love this quote from Steven Ruiz because it makes complete sense. He basically says Roman's scheme is what allows defenses to play like this. He's forcing Lamar, who is one of the most dangerous space players we have ever seen, to operate in a phone booth and then inviting the defense to load up that phone booth without any risk of being beat downfield because there's not enough wide receivers on the field. And when you hear that, you're like, wow. So they have this power run game, and EPA is expected points added, Adam. It's a statistic that everyone uses to see if plays are effective or not. In 2019, the Ravens had an elite offensive line that added significant points every time they did this power run game. It was why Lamar looked so good. Now they're not even neutral when there's 7 guys in the box in terms of expected points added. They can't run this power run game anymore. They need to get Lamar Jackson involved more in the passing game. And it's like Greg Roman refuses to do it. And that's why everyone is so frustrated as a Ravens fan.
It was fascinating for me to see. We'll get into more to our full predictions and some betting lines and Andy's bet of the week. But it was fascinating for me to hear the way that these guys that watch the Baltimore Ravens intimately were talking about how they feel like a team that maybe is very much going through a bit of a change in real time more than I realized. And it doesn't mean that by the end of the season, you may not be talking about them saying having figured some things out. But when you talk about coordinators, you talk about coaching, we talk about last week and previous weeks, we keep coming back to New York Football Giants. Every week we keep singing the praises of what the coaching staff is doing for this team. Whereas around the league, you're seeing more and more questions being asked. And listen, bless them for thinking that the way to do it is to invite more congestion around Lamar as opposed to, and this is what I said, by the way, about Daniel Jones and the Giants and the offense, spread it out, just give space, whether it's for Saquon Barkley or for Daniel Jones or anyone. I don't care if the wide receivers are crap, make them run routes that they have to. You got to at least cover somebody, right? The fact that the Ravens don't do more of that is shocking to me because you would think, let Lamar be out on the edge, looking downfield, having his legs always there as the weapon. So this really it bolstered me a little bit about maybe the Giants can get after this here, and Wink Martindale is going to be a big proponent of that.
And all of this was a lot of stats. This article came out December of last year, so it's been a little while, but the same problem still exists.
It hasn't been, because all these guys, exactly. Everyone I talked to said the same thing.
And the reason why, Adam, is you see it in terms of their play calling. Here's the last stat I'll give you, and we could just talk about what this means for the Giants, is they are bottom third of the entire league in pass play percentage, passes attempted per game, and pass yards per game. So in the key passing areas, they're not even letting Lamar Jackson throw the ball. He is an MVP level guy that has the ability to beat you downfield, and also with his legs, they're just not letting him do it at a rate that you would expect an MVP $40 million type quarterback to be able to get their opportunities. So for the Giants, if they continue to run this power run game and they say, we're going to beat you with the run, and Leonard Williams is back and Landon Collins is in the box, and all of a sudden we're stopping that power run game and we say, try to throw it over our heads with Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson back there, I like the Giants' chances on defense if they continue to bang their head against the wall and don't realize they need to spread out the offense.
No, and that's what's fascinating to me about it. You mentioned if Leonard Williams is back in there, right? A couple of these key pieces. Leonard Williams back in there, it obviously helps Dexter Lawrence. If Dexter Lawrence is playing better, now it helps Kayvon Thibodeau. Even without Azeez Ojulari out there, you can still have Ocean Ximenez. You can still have Ward. You can still have Jalen Smith, right? So the trickle-down effect and how quickly it can become a very positive point of this battle for the New York Giants. But I'm fascinated with this idea that we talked about it with the Packers. What are we watching here, right? 39 pass attempts for Aaron Rodgers. What are we physically watching here? We're not questioning it. Seemed like it happened in the Chicago game. What are we watching here? Naked bootleg. They're like, I don't know. Maybe we just don't understand it. It keeps happening, and I'm not here to question it. And by the way, that's not me just saying, oh, the Packers totally gave us a game, or the Bears did. The disguise of the plays, the way that you scheme it, the way that Mike Kafka lines it up offensively, all those things have an impact. And likewise, the game script gets a little bit tricky for you. You feel a little more bullish if you're the Packers. You're up 10 at halftime, and then that slowly goes away from you. So you're thinking, hey, if we just connect on one of these big plays, we can bury the Giants, and instead you don't, and the Giants get back into the game. So this script could work out that way. My fascination is really just with the fact that You mentioned about passing percentage. This isn't an apples to apples thing. Let's be very clear here. But the idea that Daniel Jones, his legs is one of his weapons and might be his best weapon, and then you want to build towards the passing opportunities in the same vein. This is like what I think about when you watch Cooper Rush down in Dallas, and now they're saying, hey, what do we want to do when Dak gets back? He's obviously a better pure player than Cooper Rush is. Maybe we don't try to get absolutely insane with our schemes and what we want to do offensively, and then Dak can take us to the next level. The opposite is happening in Baltimore. They're almost saying, like, we know we have this dynamic playmaker. You said $40 million guy. Well, guess what? Baltimore doesn't want to pay him that, apparently, right? You wouldn't commit to him in the offseason. And all these guys over on the Talking Ravens All Day podcast, they all said, they were like, they're trying to somehow snake their way to a discount when what you're supposed to do is load the team up with talent on the rookie deal and succeed. And to this point, we have never seen a level of consistency in their wide receiver room, to say nothing of letting Hollywood Brown walk in the offseason.
Yeah, and listen, I think we've talked about the Ravens offense enough. Obviously, we understand what Greg Roman is doing.
What are we gonna do?
Well, so yes, on our side of the ball, the one thing I wanted to mention very briefly is John Harbaugh was out there, heaping a bunch of praise on Saquon Barkley. And he basically came out and said, Saquon Barkley is public enemy number one. That was a literally direct quote from John Harbaugh. And he's like, Saquon is amazing. We got to stop him. And he's like, and he goes, oh yeah. And I guess Daniel Jones would be 1A if I had to make a decision. Basically, like, he's like, I got to talk about the quarterback. Adam, I do find it fascinating because this does feel like a game that Daniel Jones has everything in front of him to be really, really good in the passing game. I know that we're still depleted with the wide receivers. We're hoping to get Wan'Dale Robinson back. But Adam, the Baltimore Ravens are dead last in the league. They give up 290 passing yards a game. They can be had in the air. So while I love what John Harbaugh is saying about Saquon Barkley being public enemy number one, obviously you need to stop him. This has the potential for Daniel Jones to have a very big day throwing the football, using play action as well.
Yeah, I think it's capable, and I'm not reserved around what I think. Can Daniel Jones make those throws? We go back a couple of seasons and we know the deep ball accuracy that he has. It's more about where's this coaching staff and the evolution of the play calling, right? He did some really good things last week, was the leader of the team in getting the win over Green Bay, and it wasn't big bomb plays downfield, right? They were finding their spots, getting Darius Slayton into good little pockets, got Saquon Barkley on a little crossing route that he took the rest of the way for a 36-yard gain. And that's fine, whatever way manufactures it. So I am interested to see how it plays out, because there are players like, as I'll just look over to my other reference screen here, Patrick Queen, who is fast, flies around the field, right? Old friend of the Giants, Jason Pierre-Paul, is on that defensive line and doing really well. Like, I'm very curious to watch that matchup with Evan Neal, who by and large is coming along, had maybe one of the worst possible games on tape against the Cowboys. Like, you can get exposed here when you get caught worrying about other areas of concern and not necessarily focusing on some things closer to home around Daniel Jones, to say nothing. I have a top cornerback that's going to be out there. Safety room is a little bit dinged up for them. So there's areas, man. If you tell me that we get Wan'Dale out there again as well, it's, I'll be curious to see, can we get Darius Slayton in some of those downfield actions? I think it's possible. I don't care which way it goes, because, by the way, week to week, everyone is known. John Harbaugh, everybody knows Saquon Barkley is public enemy number one. And guess what? He keeps being successful every single week. So I don't need the Giants to look at the Ravens and say, well, here's one of their weaknesses, we're going to go attack it. I'll be happy if they do. I'm equally as pleased when Mike Kafka, Brian Daboll, and the Giants say, well, we just keep doing what we want to do. And what Brian Daboll to this point has usually said is, we want Saquon Barkley to get touches. We want that ball in his hands. However, he acknowledged after last game that Daniel Jones is starting to show him things on a week-to-week basis that maybe suggests we can start to open it up a little bit. You're always trying to prevent that risk. You're always trying to mitigate Daniel Jones being in a bad spot where he can make a bad play, as any quarterback can when they're under pressure.
Right. And also keep in mind, the Ravens can be beat both ways. They give up 390.
They're not a good defense.
No, their defense overall isn't great.
That's kind of my point. And maybe that's probably the best case to make. Is like Daniel Jones can go do it, but also if Saquon's already doing it, why do
we need to do it? Like, why are we going to go with our option 1B when Saquon Barkley could be the option number one that we take down? I fully recognize it. I do think the Ravens are going to stop to sell out Saquon. I think they're going to stuff the box and they're going to do very similar to what the Giants are going to do against Lamar. Say, beat us with these deeper balls. We're going to try to get home and get pressure on Daniel Jones. It'll be interesting to see. Mike Kafka and Daboll have drawn up excellent play calls at the right time. Everything seems to be working offensively to manipulate ways to move the ball down the field. You hope with both options on the table, they rank bottom 5 in the entire league in yards given up. So the Giants are going to be able to get chunk yards in the air and on the ground. It's just a matter of being able to execute when it comes out there, and who's going to be out there to execute at them.
Yeah, and yes, Wandale Robinson, right? A couple of these key players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They're also getting back. They're also getting back their left tackle over on Baltimore side
Staley,
too. So a little bit more protection there. Thank you for them on that side of it too. The last thing I think that I'll say, it's like when you go back here, and I'm just going to look at this Green Bay game, a defense that isn't necessarily as on the back end as the Baltimore Ravens are, but they haven't been performing well. When you go inside that box score, and just if we talk about the receiving numbers, right? The long was that Saquon Barkley pass over the middle for 41 yards, 26, 16, 11, 15, 13, 7. Like these are the longs for all the receivers for the New York Football Giants. At that point, like it's okay, man. Take what they're giving you, right? Spread them out just enough to give yourself those opportunities, make them just step back a little bit from it, run a couple of go routes to make sure they can get exposed. My big interesting thing here is going to be whether or not the New York Giants get into a game for the first time where they have to really push. They haven't had to do that yet. And I like the idea of that being the challenge. I don't want to see the defense struggle, but if you tell me that this is 20-10 Baltimore Ravens at halftime like it was last week, I don't love our chances coming back against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens as much as I maybe would against this year's Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, right? Like this, we love the fact that we're blowing dudes out in the second half of games. I'd also prefer it if we weren't so far behind to be blowing guys out, right? That's a big factor here for me.
That's the issue is we got lucky being able to fall behind to the Packers and be able to come back. It doesn't feel like we're necessarily built for that. Very similar to the Ravens have had that problem historically. But yes, Adam, this is going to be a great test against a very, very mediocre offense. At the end of the day, this is going to be a time where we look at the defense and they've been playing great and we've given Wink all this credit. It feels like in this matchup, it's going to rely on the offense to move the ball and be effective and get points on the board. I don't see this being a game where the Giants can score 13 points and still manufacture a win. The Ravens can score points. The Giants are going to have to match them and hope that we can get home against Lamar Jackson with some of the pressure that we have.
You better believe it. We have all day tomorrow as well to talk about this, friends. Andy Makowitz has places to be. You can get us on YouTube. You can get us on the podcast feed. And as he would want, need, and nay, demand you the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue. We're all good. I told my internal